Have you ever noticed this pattern? Someone who seemed distant, detached, or even emotionally unavailable suddenly starts showing signs of interest, but only after you've become impossible to reach. It's frustrating, confusing, and honestly, it can feel like the universe is playing a cruel joke. But here's the truth. This isn't about timing, luck, or random coincidence. It's about human psychology and how avoidants process attachment. When someone has an avoidant attachment style, they often pull away when things feel too close or vulnerable. They value freedom and independence above all else, and the moment they feel trapped, pressured, or emotionally exposed, they retreat. And here's the twist. Their feelings don't disappear. They just hide. It's only when you step back, create space, and become emotionally and physically unavailable that they begin to sense your true value. That's when the fear of loss kicks in, and suddenly they realize what they've been missing all along. It's not about playing games. It's about understanding the delicate balance between availability and self-respect. When you give too much too soon, you unknowingly push an avoidant away. But when you honor your own boundaries, pursue your own happiness, and make yourself unavailable in a healthy way, the avoidant starts to notice not just your absence, but your strength. This shift is powerful because it awakens desire in a way that presence never could. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, but in the case of an avoidant, absence makes them see clarity. It's not about manipulating someone, it's about reclaiming your own energy and allowing them to reflect on what they've lost. And here's the key, the moment they reach out, you're no longer waiting, you're living your life fully, independently, and without compromise. That's when the dynamic truly changes. And suddenly, the avoidant who seemed indifferent now wants to be a part of your world. The lesson is simple yet profound. Don't chase someone who isn't ready. Instead, become impossible to reach, not by being cruel, but by prioritizing your own growth, happiness, and presence. The moment you do that, you give them a mirror, a chance to see what they lost and what they truly desire. And in that reflection, they realize that missing you isn't just about longing, it's about understanding the value of someone who cannot be replaced. Avoidant individuals have a unique way of navigating emotions and relationships, one that often confuses those around them. At the core of their behavior is a deep-seated need for independence and autonomy. When they sense that someone is moving too close too quickly or that their emotional space is being encroached upon, their instinct is to retreat. This withdrawal is not necessarily a reflection of a lack of feelings or interest. Rather, it is a protective mechanism rooted in the fear of being overwhelmed or losing control. Avoidants often associate closeness with vulnerability, and vulnerability is something they find uncomfortable, if not threatening. The moment a relationship begins to demand emotional transparency or sustained intimacy, they perceive a kind of pressure that triggers their distancing response. This retreat can manifest in various ways. Some avoidants become physically distant, limiting communication or spending more time alone. Others may remain in proximity but emotionally disconnect, giving short or non-committal responses, avoiding deep conversations, or showing a lack of consistent engagement. The pattern is consistent. When the relationship starts to require emotional investment, they pull back, creating a dynamic where the other person feels confused and rejected. To the outside observer, this might seem like disinterest or even coldness, but for the avoidant, it is a form of self-preservation. They are guarding themselves against the intensity of intimacy, which can feel suffocating or threatening to their sense of freedom. Avoidants often have a heightened sensitivity to perceived pressure, even when it is mild or unintentional. A simple desire for more connection or emotional sharing from their partner can trigger a defense mechanism. This is why many who are involved with avoidance feel like they are walking on eggshells, trying to gauge when and how much to reach out. Any sense of neediness or urgency can act as a signal to the avoidant that their space is being compromised, prompting withdrawal. It is important to understand that this behavior is rarely personal. The avoidant is not rejecting the other person because of a flaw or inadequacy. They are responding to their internal discomfort and fear of losing autonomy. Interestingly, the retreat is also a way for avoidants to manage their own conflicting emotions. On one hand, they may feel genuine affection and attachment, while on the other hand, the intensity of their emotions triggers discomfort. Pulling away allows them to regain a sense of control and distance, which helps them manage the anxiety that closeness can provoke. This creates a push-pull dynamic in relationships. The more someone attempts to deepen intimacy, the more. The avoidant withdraws, only to potentially return once they feel emotionally safe again. Understanding this behavior is crucial for anyone involved with an avoidant, as it shifts the perspective from taking the withdrawal personally to recognizing it as a natural response to emotional pressure. One of the most powerful dynamics in relationships with avoidant individuals is the effect of absence. Unlike those with secure attachment styles, avoidants often do not fully recognize the value of someone while they are consistently available. They are wired to crave freedom and independence, and constant presence can sometimes dull their awareness of what is right in front of them. When someone is always accessible, they may unconsciously take it for granted, assuming that the connection is permanent and unshakable. The avoidant's emotional response is often delayed, and their capacity to appreciate someone's significance only truly emerges when that person becomes less reachable, both physically and emotionally. Absence triggers a subtle but profound shift in their perception. When a person who was once available and accommodating steps back, pursues their own life, and establishes boundaries, it creates a sense of scarcity. This scarcity awakens awareness because the avoidant is now confronted with the possibility of loss. Suddenly, they are faced with the realization that the presence they once took for granted was not infinite. The shift from constant access to intermittent or limited interaction forces them to evaluate their feelings, which were previously suppressed or ignored. It is not uncommon for avoidants to experience a surge of longing or introspection during this period, as absence highlights the emotional gap that they had not fully acknowledged before. This process is also deeply tied to the avoidant's fear of missing out on someone meaningful. They are oft and reluctant to admit vulnerability, but when a person becomes unavailable, the avoidant cannot ignore the emotional impact of their absence. The realization that a connection may be slipping away triggers reflection and sometimes even regret. This is why the timing of absence is so crucial. It allows the avoidant to notice qualities, emotions, and significance that constant presence had previously masked. It is as though the distance creates a mirror, forcing them to see the value of what they had only when it is temporarily gone. It is important to note that this awareness is not automatic or guaranteed. It emerges because absence introduces a psychological tension. The avoidant's mind starts weighing the potential loss against their need for independence, and in doing so, they begin to reassess the relationship with clarity. What was once overlooked or undervalued now appears precious. They may begin to feel a pull toward reconnection, not necessarily because they were previously inattentive, but because the absence makes them conscious of what their life would be without that connection. Absence, therefore, is not about punishment or manipulation. It is about creating space for reflection and allowing the avoidant to confront their own feelings. It is through this distance that they often start to appreciate the presence they once underestimated. The paradox is that stepping back can be the most effective way to awaken desire, recognition, and emotional engagement in someone who tends to retreat when closeness becomes intense. By being less accessible, you give them the opportunity to truly see and feel the significance of what they might have otherwise ignored. When it comes to relationships with avoidant individuals, creating space and becoming less accessible is often misunderstood as manipulation or game playing. Many people fear that stepping back, asserting boundaries or prioritizing their own life will be interpreted as petty or controlling. In reality, this approach is not about controlling someone else's feelings. It is about honoring your own needs and protecting your emotional well-being. Boundaries are not a tool to coerce someone into desiring you. They are a framework for maintaining self-respect, clarity, and stability in situations that can otherwise feel emotionally turbulent. For someone who is avoidant, who tends to retreat in the face of emotional intensity, boundaries act as both a safeguard and a signal. They communicate that you value yourself, that your time and energy are precious, and that your life does not revolve solely around them. Establishing boundaries is fundamentally an act of self-empowerment. It allows you to reclaim your attention, focus, and energy, which are often drained when pursuing someone who struggles with closeness. For avoidants, this can be both shocking and enlightening because they are not accustomed to encountering someone who is emotionally available but not constantly at their disposal. The moment you prioritize yourself and make it clear that your presence is contingent on mutual respect, it forces the avoidant to recognize your worth in a way that constant availability never could. The key here is authenticity. You are not withdrawing out of spite or to teach them a lesson, but out of necessity, because your well-being matters and your emotional boundaries are non-negotiable. Boundaries also serve as a mirror to the avoidance behavior. They highlight what is acceptable and what is not, creating clarity in a relationship that might otherwise be filled with confusion and emotional ambivalence. When you stop overextending yourself to accommodate their avoidance, they are confronted with the reality that the connection requires effort and reciprocity. This can ignite reflection because avoidants often underestimate the impact of their emotional distance. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are a demonstration of self-respect that subtly communicates, I am here, but I will not be diminished or devalued. Importantly, setting boundaries is not about withdrawing love or affection. It is about regulating your energy and creating a safe emotional environment for both parties. For avoidants, who often struggle with intimacy, this distinction is crucial. When someone is consistently chasing or available without limits, the avoidant may feel suffocated and respond with further retreat. Conversely, when a person demonstrates that they have a fulfilling life, interests, and standards, the avoidant begins to reassess what they might be losing, fostering curiosity and desire rather than fear or pressure. In essence, boundaries are the foundation for a healthier, more balanced relationship. They allow you to be compassionate and caring without sacrificing yourself, and they give the avoidant the space to reflect on their feelings honestly. Rather than being manipulative, boundaries are a declaration of personal value, strength, and clarity that shifts the relational dynamic in a way that fosters respect, awareness, and ultimately deeper connection. It comes to avoidant individuals. Constant presence rarely inspires appreciation or emotional engagement. Being always available may seem like a loving or supportive gesture, but for someone with an avoidant attachment style, it can have the opposite effect. Avoidants are wired to maintain independence and personal space, and consistent availability can inadvertently create a sense of predictability that diminishes their awareness of your value. They are accustomed to taking things for granted, not because they do not care, but because their attachment style naturally distances them from recognizing emotional significance until it is contrasted with absence. The key dynamic here is that presence alone rarely triggers introspection. It is reflection that creates awareness, and reflection is often catalyzed by distance. Reflection occurs when there is a pause in interaction, when someone steps back and is no longer immediately accessible. This pause forces the avoidant to consider what they may have overlooked. The moment a person who was once consistently present becomes less available, the avoidant is confronted with the reality of potential loss. It is in this space between presence and absence that clarity begins to form. They start to notice the nuances, the thoughtfulness, the warmth, the consistency that were previously invisible because they were taken for granted. The contrast between what was always there and what is now temporarily unavailable allows them to reevaluate their own feelings and the importance of the relationship. Avoidants often struggle to process emotions in real time, especially in relationships that demand intimacy or vulnerability. Their instinct is to retreat rather than confront uncomfortable feelings. Presence alone does not create the tension necessary for self-reflection. It only reinforces the status quo. When you step back, however, the avoidant is compelled to assess what your absence means. They may begin to question their choices, recognize their own emotional patterns, and even feel a longing that was previously dormant. This reflection is not about punishment or manipulation. It is about providing them with the mental and emotional space to truly understand your significance. Furthermore, reflection allows the avoidant to engage with their feelings in a more controlled and thoughtful way. When someone is constantly present, emotions can feel immediate and overwhelming, prompting them to retreat further. Absence, on the other hand, creates a buffer that makes their emotional processing safer. They are able to examine their attachment, their desires, and their fears without the pressure of immediate interaction. This internal reflection often leads to a or genuine acknowledgement of what they value and miss. The irony is that the very thing they resisted, the closeness or presence, becomes more meaningful when it is no longer guaranteed. Ultimately, presence without reflection is invisible to an avoidant. Reflection without presence is transformative. By allowing space, boundaries, and limited accessibility, you give the avoidant the opportunity to see what was always there, but never fully appreciated. The contrast between being consistently present and suddenly stepping back illuminates their own emotional gaps, fostering awareness and desire. In relationships with avoidance, the power does not lie in constant availability, but in creating moments that inspire introspection and self-awareness. This is the subtle art of shifting the dynamic, not through manipulation, but through the balance of presence and thoughtful distance. Empowerment is one of the most transformative tools when navigating relationships with avoidant individuals. The dynamic between someone who is emotionally distant and someone who desires connection can often feel unbalanced, leaving the person pursuing the relationship exhausted or frustrated. However, embracing empowerment, focusing on your own life growth and happiness, dramatically shifts this dynamic. When you live fully and independently, you demonstrate that your value is not contingent on anyone else's recognition or presence. This, in turn, naturally draws the attention and respect of an avoidant who is often unaware of what they truly want until confronted with the reality of your self-sufficiency. Empowerment changes the narrative from one of chasing and uncertainty to one of clarity and mutual respect. Living empowered is not about making the avoidant feel jealous or manipulating their feelings. It is about prioritizing yourself and your own emotional well-being. Avoidants tend to withdraw when someone appears overly available or overly dependent on them. When you shift your focus to your own interests, friendships, career, or personal goals, you create a magnetic pull. The avoidant observes that your life is rich and fulfilling even without them being fully engaged. And this realization can spark curiosity, desire, and even admiration. The dynamic changes because now you are not emotionally invested in chasing them. You are emotionally invested in yourself. This shift is subtle but powerful because it removes the imbalance of neediness and replaces it with confidence, self-worth, and authenticity. Empowerment also forces the avoidant to confront their own feelings. When someone is unavailable in a healthy and self-respecting way, it highlights the avoidance, previous neglect, or emotional distance. They begin to notice the qualities they may have taken for granted: your patience, your thoughtfulness, your consistency, and your ability to live independently. This reflection can lead to an awakening, where the avoidant starts to recognize the real cost of their avoidance. They may experience a mixture of longing and respect, realizing that the person they once pushed away is now thriving without being controlled or diminished by their distance. Another key aspect of empowerment is that it provides emotional safety. By creating boundaries and prioritizing your needs, you remove the chaos and uncertainty that often fuels an avoidance retreat. You are no longer accessible at all times, but you are also not playing games or withholding out of fear. Instead, you are demonstrating balance. You can care, engage, and connect, but only on terms that honor your self-respect. This balance can shift the avoidance perspective from seeing you as someone to manipulate or evade, to seeing you as a person whose presence is valuable and whose boundaries must be respected. Ultimately, empowerment transforms the entire relational dynamic. It takes the power out of the avoidant's hands and returns it to you, while simultaneously creating a mirror that reflects their feelings and priorities. By living fully, independently, and confidently, you awaken desire and recognition in a way that chasing or pleading never could. Empowerment is not about control. It is about reclaiming your own life, setting a standard for how you are treated, and inspiring the avoidant to engage from a place of genuine reflection and respect rather than avoidance or fear. In closing, the journey of understanding why an avoidant only misses you once you become impossible to reach is a lesson in self-respect, awareness, and empowerment. It teaches us that creating healthy boundaries, stepping back with intention, and prioritizing our own growth is not manipulation. It is a declaration of our worth. Absence sparks reflection. Presence without boundaries can be overlooked, and true empowerment transforms the dynamic, allowing both parties to see what is truly valuable. By honoring ourselves and living fully, we create space for genuine recognition and desire, reminding the avoidant and ourselves of the power of authenticity and self-love. Thank you all for listening. Tending and embracing the courage to put yourself first, understand human behavior deeply, and cultivate relationships that honor both connection and personal strength.